Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the session. So my name is Nikki Kimball. I'm one of the educational consultants here at Just2Easy. And today's webinar, we're going to be looking at using j2code to teach coding and computational thinking. As always, a little bit of housekeeping. It is a 45-ish minute session. If any of you know me and have been to my webinars, you'll know I do have a tendency to run over, but I promise it won't be any more than 5 minutes. Questions can be asked via the chat. I do have Mary in the background. Anything that Mary can't answer, I will answer at the end of the session. So don't give her too many hard questions about coding. The session is being recorded and we will make that available through our YouTube channel. Now, in terms of what we're going to cover, we're going to look at j2code. So j2code has 3 main tools within it. So we're going to start with j2turtle, which is brilliant for your little ones, beginnings of coding. We're then going to look at visual, which is our block-based coding platform, much like Scratch. So you build up the blocks to create commands to navigate your sprites. And then we're going to finalize the session with Logo, which is a programming language in itself. Can look a bit scary, but hopefully we will unpick that little bit and give you a bit of confidence to use that with your class. And I'm also going to showcase just a few library resources that we have available for you to use. Right. Well, let's delve straight into it. So j2code is our tool that we use for the coding. And as I said, there's 3 different elements to it. We begin with Turtle. So Turtle includes simple pre-made templates ready for your users to interact with. They are increasing in complexity. So there's various levels for the users to navigate through. It also allows you to integrate pictures. So you can create your own games. It allows people to add multiple sprites if they want to. And you can share Turtle games with users. So you can create games, share them with your class. A good example of this is you could create a bugged game, so a game with a mistake in it, share it with your students, and they can then figure out where the bug is and fix it. So that's a really good activity if you are looking for activity ideas. Now, I'm not going to spend very long on Turtle because it is quite self-explanatory. I wanted to spend a little bit more time on the upper 2 levels, but just to show you the sort of the basics of Turtle. So from my Launchpad, j2code is over here on my Launchpad. It may well be in a slightly different place on your Launchpad. So I'm going to click that, and that's going to open up j2code. So there are various things just to highlight to you. We do have, say, lesson plans, and more of activity suggestions for each year group. We've also got some examples that you can have a look at. So there are examples for each level. You can share code. There are various resources, and there's also the Hive hackers, which I'm going to showcase to you a little bit later. So don't worry too much about that at this moment in time. So j2turtle is here. You can also get to j2turtle by opening up JIT, and it is the green tab with the green page. So as with all of our JIT tools, it opens up with the templates to start with. Now these are, as I said, preset games essentially. So we've got the Big Bad Wolf, and it starts with the simplest game and increases in complexity. So Cinderella is the most difficult. So let's have a look at the Big Bad Wolf. I'm going to click and open that. We've got our preset sprite, our Big Bad Wolf, and the aim of the game is to hit the houses in the correct order. So first of all, the students need to figure out which order to go in. So obviously it's the straw house, the wood house, and then the brick house. So that's the first thing they need to figure out. And then they have these buttons here on their sprite. So they have very simple buttons: forwards, backwards, left, right, pen down, pen up. Okay, now that's quite useful because we do build on that later on with Logo. They are the same instructions. So that's a good stepping stone. There are two modes to JIT-Turtle. There is the simple mode and the advanced mode. Now the simple mode, if I click one of these buttons, I'm going to put my pen down and you can see my algorithm builds up here in this script area. And then I can use these buttons and my sprite will move with each button press. Okay, so we can see there it moves at the same time. So that is my simple mode. For the advanced mode, if I click on advanced, my sprite now won't move, so the children need to predict where it's going to end up. Okay, so that's a good skills progression step. You could ask them to use it in advanced mode and predict where it's going to end up. Now on this template, you might not be able to see on my screen, but if I zoom in, you can see there is actually a grid built in. So that is really helpful for the students figuring out how many steps, how many turns, how many forwards they need to go. So we'll figure this out. So my sprite needs to turn towards this wood house. So if we turn right, so it's going to be facing this way now, and then we can use this grid. So we've got 1, 2, 3. So we're going to go forwards 1, 2, 3, and you can see that algorithm has built up there in the left hand side. Now if I add an extra one, and I'm going to press play. So this is an important part of the coding process, is the children coding something and then testing the algorithm. Okay, so I would always get them to, program a little bit, then press the play button to test that algorithm. And that's a prime example of why you should do that. Okay, so if the children carried on coding, that mistake, that extra forward might get missed, and it's a lot more difficult to figure out where that bug is if you've got a big long line of code, as opposed to if they're doing a couple of steps at a time, testing, a couple of steps at a time and testing. So that's a really good process to teach them and to encourage them to use throughout the coding process. So if they've added an algorithm by mistake, if we hover over, we can press that cross at the end of that, and that will remove that completely. Now we can also maneuver these algorithms. So this forward here, I might want to move that on top of that right and change my algorithm. So you can move them, they're not static. So let's see how that has changed where our sprite ends up. So if we press play, and there we go. He's almost got to the right place. We just need an extra forwards. So we can click that extra forwards, press play, and see where he ends up. Has he hit our house? Yes, he has. And the nice thing about this particular game is they get that feedback. The houses collapse as they touch, as they sort of move over those houses. So they know that they've hit those houses. So it is a nice game. You can do things like adding extra sprites. So we've got this plus button here. So that allows us to add additional sprites. That's great if they're making their own game, for example. They can add their own background. They can add their own sprites. I think they can add up to 4 sprites off the top of my head. I would probably encourage them to do a maximum of 2 because it can get a bit busy on the page and then it gets a bit confusing. Okay. There's also things like they can clear their commands. So if we click this button here, that will give us a little warning but dialog box. Do you want to clear the commands? And you can click yes, and that will clear that completely, ready to start again. There are also things like you can change your pen color by clicking here, and you can remove that sprite. So if you want to add a different sprite, you can remove that one and add in a new sprite. So we could have a cat instead, for example. We can change the starting place just by clicking and dragging. And there we go. Okay. Then, as with all of our JIT tools, you can rename that file. You can record the audio to go alongside this file. So maybe the students want to showcase some evidence. Maybe they want to talk about what they did during that activity, what they've learned during that activity, maybe any key vocabulary that they've used. So they can record audio to attach to that particular file. And then when they're done, they click that save button and that will save into their My Files. And you, of course, can access that through the pupil files area once they've saved anything. If they did want to go to a different level, we just press this asterisk here, top left. That will open up our templates and we can choose a different template. Now, if you are interested in adding your own background image, you can do that by going to the pictures. You can add anything that you've created or saved into your My Files. You've also got the option to do your web search. So, for example, maybe let's look for a space background, and they can add that as a background. There we go. Unfortunately, we can't do much about the fact that it's landscape and it hasn't filled that page, but we can then add in a character on top. So let's add our rocket, and we can have that starting in a certain place and navigating through space. So that is how you would create your own game. Okay. So if you wanted to share this with your students, you can rename this. So we could have turtle game and save that. So then to share that with your students, you would go to your My Files. You would hover over that particular piece of work, so turtle game. Go to the green circle, go to share, and then you would share that with whoever you want to share it with. So your class, a teaching class, a particular user, or another class in school. So I'm going to share that with my class, and they now have access to that through the shared files area on their Launchpad. Okay, so that is j2code. Very brief overview. It is quite self-explanatory. It's designed to be easy to use, and it's great definitely for your reception year 1, year 2s, which is your P1, 2, 3 if you're from Northern Ireland or Scotland. And then you would build up to using Visual. So Visual is our block-based coding program. This has 3 levels of complexity, so it will do you for your year 2, 3, 4, 5. So in the middle part of your primary sector, which is P3, 4, 5, 6 for Northern Ireland and Scotland. And it allows us to use a huge variety of different sprites, backgrounds, and web search images. So these are just 2 examples we've got, and this is actually, I think this one is already in the examples library. And this is one that I'm going to show you how we can create this. So this is just a very simple animation with some conversation. So we've got, I am a fish, I swim in the sea, and then we've got our crab saying, I am a crab. I am an omnivore. So the way I used to teach this, particularly if you're doing conversation, so conversation is quite simple really. I would build it into my topic. I would get the students to maybe research some facts and to have 2 characters that are then reciting those facts. So not only have you got your coding skills hit, you've also got things like your researching. They've written those down. I've linked it into the topic. So it's quite a cross-curricular activity as opposed to a standalone coding activity. So that's just an idea for you. So let's have a go at making this. So Visual, again, from our code, Visual is here, and this is the only way to get to Visual. There aren't any shortcuts, unfortunately. And Visual always opens up like this. We'll always have our little penguin on our blank background. At Christmas time, you will probably have a reindeer. That is the only time that changes as a default. So the first thing I want to do is I want to load in a background. So I'm going to show you how I would teach this to students in a class if I was allowed to be in a classroom again. So the first thing I would do is create my background. Now, Visual has 3 levels, and those levels can be found here. So I'm just going to zoom in just so you can see. We've got this sort of code symbol here, and this drop down menu, if I click there, I've got my 3 different levels. So you've got your level 1, and the difference is it just streamlines some of the commands. Okay, so that's level 1. We've got things like motion, and that really again streamlines the options they have within that motion subsection. We've got looks, so that's things like saying hello, which is what we're going to use, switching costumes, setting the size of our character. Pen, so that's pen up, pen down, random colour. Text, so we can have text boxes. Control, so your repeats, your forever do, and your wait before something happens. And your sound, so that's quite nice. You can create your own piano if you really want to, and you can set a sound to play. Level 2 has a little bit more. So now we've added things like, in our motion, we've actually got some more options. We've got things like set X, set Y, Y position, rotation, gliding. On our looks, we've got stamp, we can set the text. We've got events now, so when something happens, so when we press the space bar, when we press the up key, when the sprite is clicked. Sensing, so things like touching the mouse pointer, it's going to do something when the mouse pointer touches it. Distances, and so on and so forth. I mean, some of these operators, I feel like I should know what these do, but this is a little above my pay grade now. But this does get very technical. So we've got things like our sounds. And then level 3, well, we've got things like procedures, variables, lists, operators, and sensing. So there's lots and lots of different things in there as well. So I'm going to stick with level 2. It's my personal preference. It gives you enough for the kids to be getting along with without being overwhelming. So that's the difference between the 3 levels. So as I said, the first thing I want to do is to add in a background. Now you don't have to add in a background. This is optional. You can just start coding our character here. So this is our sprite or our character. So we can start moving him around. But I'm going to change that for a background. So to change this, we've got our little penguin button here at the top. I'm just going to zoom in just so you can see. So that is how you change anything to do with the look of the sprite. So if I click that, now it's given us lots of options. So we can do things like making him bigger or smaller. You can make that a background if you wanted to. So that now you would have a sprite that navigates over the top of that. But to change our character, we're going to go to this button here. It's the penguin with the plus button. So I'm going to click that, and that's going to give us loads of preset options. So there are various different costumes. So we can have the penguin with his eyes closed. We've got some animated characters. So these will move when you add them to the page. So things like dancing, the pig's legs move, the butterflies wings flap. I don't know what's going on. I can't think of words today. And we've got lots of different categories here. So these very much link into some of the clip art libraries that we've already got and more. So we've got things like letters. So you could have letters flying in to make words. A great sort of tenuous link to your literacy curriculum. Got mini beasts, space, transport, underwater. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create an underwater animation. So the first thing is we're going to go to the backgrounds tab, which is right at the bottom. And you have to hover over the tab and then sort of move over to the page. And there we go. We've got lots of backgrounds to choose from. So things like Starry Night. We've got a maze. So if you wanted to get them to try and navigate their sprite around a maze, that's very difficult, but they can try. We've got things like the cars, school playground. And I am just going to click on, can't see where it is. There it is. The underwater. Now you do also have the option to select anything from your own My Files. So that is My Pictures, Shared Pictures, and also web search. So you can search for images. So, you know, things like underwater background. Let's see what comes up. Should have tested this before I showcased it. So there we go. We've got lots and lots of different backgrounds that you can choose from. So some photographs as well. Okay, so you're not just restricted to these here, but I am going to choose this one. So I'm going to click on it and click OK. And that's added that as a background. Now, because it's pulled it from the background library, it is preset to be a background. Okay, so you don't need to tick that box. Now, what I would highly recommend is that you get your students to rename this particular tab. So at the moment, this is Sprite 1. And this will make it much easier for your students. So this really is quite an important step from my own experience. So we've got this little arrow here that's next to Sprite 1. I'm going to zoom in just so you can see. I click that. I can do things like clone. So if you have got a sprite and you want another one, you can clone it. But we've got this button that says rename. So I would rename this as your background. Now the reason for that, so when I click OK, that's saved that there. The reason for that is I have spent many teaching hours where students have programmed and coded the background of their game and then wondered why it doesn't do anything. And it's such a shame, because then they have to actually apply the coding to the actual sprite that they have added, and it takes the same amount of time again for them to code it. So that really is quite an important step. So add a background, use that drop down menu and rename it. So now we can add an additional sprite to our game. And to do that, we're going to press that plus button. And as always, our default sprite is our little penguin. So you could leave him. I mean, he's technically could be an underwater animal. But we're going to change him for a fish. And this is the same as we did with our background. We're going to click on our little penguin button here. We're going to click on our little penguin plus button. And then here we go. We've got our fish. So we're going to just click on our fish and then click OK. And that has changed our sprite. So then you can rename your Sprite 1. You don't have to, but I'm going to just for today. So let's rename him Fish. Just makes it a little bit easier for the children to differentiate between which sprite they are currently coding. And then we'll add in another. So again, we're going to go to our penguin. We're going to go to our penguin plus, and we'll add in our crab. Now there are other animals available. So we've got things like your alligator and your polar bear, and there's lots of underwater animals. We've got things like a sea lion and various fish, jellyfish. But when you've selected your animal, you click OK, and that's going to drop that in. Now it always drops the sprite into the middle of the page. So that is the 0, 0 position. So there is an X and a Y axis. Okay. So it always drops it into 0, 0, but you can click and hold and reposition that sprite wherever you want to add it as its starting point. And just to highlight, at the bottom there is a grid. So this is really useful. You can click the grid on, so that just makes it a little bit easier. I think these are 40, I don't know, steps. 40 position extra 40, I don't know. So there we go. So we can turn that grid on or off. But if we hover the mouse pointer over, that will demonstrate exactly the position for that particular sprite. So we can see that's -92, Y -48. Okay, so that's really useful when they are starting to code to the X and Y positions, which will make a little bit more sense in a second. Because they can see, they can hover the mouse over. You might want to just give them, you know, a pencil and some paper just to write things down whilst they're coding. It just makes it a little bit easier. Okay, so we've added in our background. I haven't renamed my second sprite, so I'm just going to do that quickly. So I'm going to go to rename and make him crab. There we go. So now I'm going to program my fish. So I'm going to click fish at the top. That's going to bring up my fish in the sprite editing box, because that was the last box we were looking at. To access the code, we're going to click on this code button here. Okay. So it's the 2 arrows, and that's going to bring us to our coding options. Now you can play around with these. The way I used to teach it is I would let the kids have a play, see what they could create, see if they could break it, which generally they could. But I gave them that exploratory opportunity to just have a play, and then I would start teaching them. And the way I would teach them is to set them challenges. So once they've had that exploration, they've kind of figured out what some of these buttons do. I would then say, right, I want this fish to swim over this side. Can you do that? So off they would go. So if you want to know how to get the fish to move, we use the events or the control buttons. It's really up to you what you prefer or what they prefer. So there are things like forever do, so we can get the fish swimming side to side. You can have it repeating by a number of times. I quite like the events. So when the space bar is pressed, so the kids have to do something on the keyboard for the sprite to move. But let's go for control. Let's go repeat 10 times. And we want him to move. So we're going to open up our motion buttons because they are responsible for the moving. Now, some of these don't do what you think they would do. So this move forward actually moves him up. So we don't want to use that. But again, that's another thing that you could get the students to have a challenge, and I can guarantee they will add that in, say that they're done. And then when you say, right, well, we're going to play that and see what happens. Where has he gone? That wasn't quite what we wanted. So we can click stop. So that is how we test our algorithm. We press the play button and then we press the stop button and it will reset it. And we can remove any blocks that don't work. So once they've removed a block, if it doesn't work, they can hover it over the bin and that will delete that. So the one that I tend to like to use is not any of these move buttons. It's actually the glide to button. So it really depends what year group you're working with, whether they're aware of the X and Y axes yet. But we can set this to glide, so that will move slowly to a certain position. So if I hover my mouse, I want my fish to end up about here. So that is X 160, Y 100, for example. So let's go X, and we'll add that in 160, Y 100. And then you would get them to test their algorithm. And you're going to do that by pressing the play button. So we press play. Has he moved to the right place? Yes. Okay. So if you want him to move backwards and forwards, we can have him rotating. Now that gets a little bit more difficult because you have to have a different costume where he's facing the other way. So I'll leave you to figure that one out. But there is a change costume button. I think it's in the looks. Yeah, switch costume to, and there we go. We can have him swimming right or swimming left. So you would add in another sprite here that's looking the other way, and that's how you would rotate those. Okay. So I'm going to move that over there. And then we want our fish to say something. So that is within the looks subsection. So we've got say something or say hello for a number of seconds. So let's add that in, and that will click together like a little jigsaw. And we can say, I am a fish. For example, we can have that for 5 seconds. Or let's go for 3 seconds. Let's play that and see what happens. And there we go. It's going to repeat that because we've added it in there 10 times. So we want repeat maybe just 1 time. And let's play that and see what happens. So there we go. Conscious of time, I do want to spend a bit of time on logo just to show you. If you were then to program your crab, you would then need to click on your crab tab. That's catchy. The sound has gone again. Can you hear me now? it's fine. Okay. We lost the sound in the last webinar. How bizarre. So we've got our crab. We've opened up our crab tab. And again, we're in the editing box. So we need to go to the code box. And then you would add your code for your crab as well. So you would do the same thing. You would choose some sort of control or event. So maybe we'll have when the space bar is pressed for our crab. And we want him to do something. So let's go move. And we could have, what shall we have? Change Y by, let's go change Y by 150. And let's see where he ends up. So again, you're going to test your algorithm. So you're going to press play. Our fish moves. And we're going to hit the space bar. And we're going to see where he ends up. So that's not quite the position I was thinking he was going to end up. So we don't need to change Y. So we need to remove that. We need to change X because I want him to end up over here. So we're going to find motion. Set X to, let's go 180. Let's go play and let's press the space bar, and that has moved our crab. So it is just a case of trial and error. See what you and the kids can create. There is no right and wrong way to do it. There's lots of different ways to achieve the same objective. So just have a look through some of these and have a play. And then of course you can save by clicking on that save button. That will save into your My Files. If the kids are doing it, it'll save into their My Files, and you as a teacher can access it in the pupil files area. Just to highlight, we do have some examples. So those you can, I'm going to click continue. You can access those through j2code. We've got the examples area here, and you can access it through the tools themselves. There'll be an examples button at the top. So these are the visual examples. I wouldn't pay too much attention to the year groups because I feel like they are leveled slightly ambitiously, to put it that way. But some of them are nice to give you an idea of some of the coding. So this is year 1. I wouldn't use this with year 1. This is more end of year 2, beginning of year 3. So that's your P3, P4. To view the code, you press this button here, and there we go. So if we press play, there is our rocket creating a square. So that's a nice link into my logo, because that's what we're going to do with logos. We're going to create some polygons. So yes, so have a look at those examples. They will give you an idea of what can be created. There is quite a nice one. This is a game where the kids can use things like the right arrow and the left arrow to do things. I don't know what, there we go. So down, up. So if we press play, we can move. So it's very much like a game that they might play at home on an iPad. They have to avoid the planets, but the code is quite extreme. Okay, so that is visual. Now we're going to spend 10 minutes looking at logo. And I need to get my presentation up. So Logo uses a logo programming language that's actually called Logo. It was designed to teach students how to program a turtle around a page. And the turtle demonstrates the output for given commands or algorithms. As with visual, there are 3 levels of complexity, starting with level 1. And we'll have a look at it now. So these are just examples. We are going to look at creating a polygon, and this is an example. This is actually in the library, so you can have a look at this. And it's not actually as complicated as it looks, but that is a spirograph game where you can create your own spirograph. So this is Logo. So as I said, there are 3 differing levels. Level 1, it works very similarly to j2code. So you've got your forwards, your right, your forwards, your back, your left, and you've got your pen colors. You've got home, so that will take your turtle home. So this little arrow here is called a turtle. You've got your clear canvas, so that will clear everything that you've created. You've got your pen down and your pen up. So that's a nice stepping stone to begin with. Again, if I was teaching this, I would get the students to have a go on level 1, see what they can create. So let's see if they can create a square. So it's going to be forwards, right, forwards, right, forwards, right, forwards. So there you go. You've got your regular polygon, which is your square in this case. And we can actually see the commands. If we use this drop down arrow here, that will give us a list of those commands that we have used. So that's just an overview. Okay. Now I prefer to use level 2. Now the reason for that is because the students can see those commands in the list, so on this screen here, but they're not yet in the shorthand version that you will get in level 3. However, the students can start to play with some of these numbers. So forward 50, that's telling us how far it's moving forward 50, how far it's moving forward. Okay, so if we want to make that a bigger square, we can increase those numbers. So we could say forwards 100, and we're just going to change those numbers. And that should, when I press play, make that a bigger square. I'm not quite sure why. Oh, because I didn't put a right at the end. So let's clear that canvas. So that is the clear canvas there. And if I can write things in as well. So I can write commands. So if I say reset, and that will reset the turtle. So there we go. We've got our bigger square. Now, the other thing to point out, when we say turn right, that is the angle that we want it to turn by. And I will explain that a little more in a second. So if we change that to 45, for example, and see what happens, and we press play, again, the same as we did with visual, we're going to test that algorithm, see what happens. We've got the first half of an octagon. Okay, so you would need to repeat this another 4 times to finish that octagon. So if I press play, I can copy this. So I can right click and copy, and I can paste that in there. See if we've completed our octagon. Almost. Not quite sure where it's gone, actually. I've done something wrong somewhere. So that's level 2. Moving swiftly on. Level 3, and I'm going to clear this script. I'm going to clear this canvas here, and I'm going to type reset. So reset, that will, if I add reset, or I can add clear screen, they both do the same, that resets that turtle to that starting position. So that's really useful for the students to know that, to add that to the beginning of their coding. Right, I've got 5 minutes left. Let's go. So this is where we can get slightly more complicated. Now this is just shorthand. So FD, forward, backward, left, right, pen down, pen up. And in fact, if you hover your mouse over these buttons, it will give you that tip, that sort of what the button means. Home, so that will take you home. Clear screen or clear canvas. And then we've got things like we can change our pen color. So if I use this drop down menu, I can select a pen color. So let's go for red, or let's go for lime green, for example. So that now has set that as a command. We've got our repeat button, which is important. Okay, we're going to start looking at repeating loops in a second. And then creating procedures. Let's not look at that. Other things that we can do, we've got things like the turtle. We can create things like arcs. So this is like curved lines. Circles, so you can create circles, and if you add circle and then add a number, that is the radius of the circle. Okay, so you can get the kids to figure out, I want a circle of a diameter of, I don't know, 200. So what would the radius be? We've got things like set Y, set XY, set X, reset pen width, so you can make your pen wider. So there's lots of different things that we can do there. So they're really useful. And your maths ones are a little bit scary, and your list ones are even scarier. So I would just personally, in Key Stage 2, I would stick to from turtle upwards. Right. So we're going to look at creating a polygon in 4 minutes. So for our square, we wrote our commands earlier. So we did forwards, right, forwards, right, forwards, right, forwards, right. Because it has 4 sides, it needs to move forwards and it needs to rotate by 90 degrees 4 times. So if we press play, there is our square. That's a very inefficient way of writing algorithms. So this is where you start to explore using the repeat function. So I'm going to delete out that code, and I'm going to add in just by clicking on repeat 4, I'm going to add that as a repeat button. Okay. Now anything that goes in these square brackets will be repeated by that number of times. So we've got 4 sides and 4 corners. So in these brackets we need a forwards and a turn. Okay, and we're going to press play. So I'm going to clear this canvas. I'll press play and see if that gives us the same outcome. And it does. Okay, so that's a good way of encouraging your students to think about what is the most efficient way for me to use my code, and it's to start using those repeat functions. Now, when doing polygons, we want to create, for example, a 5-sided square, which is a pentagon, obviously. So the repeats for that would, instead of 4, would be 5. Okay. Now, this angle here, right 90, that is the angle that your turtle is going to turn by. So obviously 90 degrees is a right angle. In a pentagon, it's not 90 degrees. Okay, and the easiest way for the kids to figure this out is 360 degrees divided by the number of corners, or the number of sides, so in this case 5. So 360 divided by 5 gives us 75, I think. So we'll check it, we'll press play, and there we go. Whew. We've got our pentagon. So once they know that, then you can say, right, I want to create a hexagon. So we have repeat 6. And what's the angle? 360 degrees divided by 6, which is 60. Has that given us our hexagon? Yes, it has. Octagon would be 8 and 45. I feel like that's wrong. I'm going to double check that. So they can start playing around and they realise that this is sort of a static thing that doesn't change as long as they get the maths correct, she says. Not quite right, isn't it? 45, that's why. So if I press play, there we go. Got my octagon. So that is just a very simple activity idea that you can use with your kids in class. I'm conscious of time. I have done a live lesson with that particular activity for your students. So that is on our YouTube channel. Now the live lessons are designed for you to follow along. Now this one unfortunately is quite blurry. This is before we figured out how to stop it being blurry. So I am most likely going to do a repeat version of this. Instead of polygons, we're going to look at writing letters. So that will be next term. So join us for that one. And we will advertise that on Facebook and things like that. So that is, there we go, on our YouTube channel. If you go to the live tab, it is there, regular polygons, and there's lots of other live lessons for you to have a look at as well. So designed for you to stream, follow along. I will teach your class for you. I mean, who doesn't love that? And it allows you to upskill yourself. And there's a lot more detail about the math side of that particular activity included in that live lesson. So have a look at that. Right, just very quickly, some library resources. If you go to the library and if you type in code Some of them bring up other things, but there are a lot of coding activities. So this is like an Easter egg trail. So this is written in j2code. This is Mr. Wright, who's a freelance consultant we have. And this is just a nice little Easter game that you can have a go at, and you can share that with your students. They can have a go. We've also got Hive Hackers. So this is linked in to Visual. So it is in the library, and it's also within j2code. Now these are, if I start with session 1, it does start with session 1. They've got teacher guides and also pupil activity work packs. So these are designed to be either printed out. They are big, so I do warn you, it may be quite costly to print them out. There, I think they're about 20 pages each. But they are designed to work alongside that teacher pack with the visual. It talks about computational thinking, uses algorithmic language. It's very much an off-screen activity that to then transfer those skills on screen. So it's got things like algorithm. What's the definition of an algorithm? Well, it's a set of step-by-step instructions given in the right order to make something happen. There you go. If you wanted the definition of an algorithm. What's code? I'm not going to give you that. And then you've got some graph paper programming, and they start to write these instructions in this box. They then transfer those skills onto on screen using visual. So that is there. It is a very extensive program. So there are lots of levels. Just be mindful that those worksheets are huge. So maybe get the bill payers permission before you print those out. But they are there, and I think they get overlooked quite a lot. They are also in the resource library. So for example, this one is created by Hive Hackers, Activity 8. It gives you a student file, but it's also, if you click on the teacher files, it's given you a pre-programmed file. So it's a cheat code, basically. It's an answer sheet. So that shows you exactly how to make this fish jump and change costumes. So that's a great way of sort of upskilling yourself by looking at code that's already coded and then showing your kids. So that's an idea as well. Right, 3 minutes over, I'm sorry. As always, our contact details, edteam@j2e.com if you want to get in touch with us. I know a lot of you email us regularly. It's very nice. We enjoy it very much. We're also on our social media. So we've got Facebook and X, Just2Easy or Just2Easy_com. And we've got our YouTube channel, which I showed, which is Just2Easy TV. So give us a like, follow, subscribe, tweet, post, whatever you want to do. Right. Have we got any questions? I feel like this might be a session that I need to revisit to expand on later in the year, because I feel like we've only just touched the surface with some of these tools. But Mary, have we had any questions, my dear?
No questions.
Oh, okay. Well, if anybody has got any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat. If not, then thank you ever so much for giving up your precious time to join us. We hope that you've got something out of this webinar, a little bit of confidence, if nothing else, to try it with your kids. So let us know how you get on. Join us for more webinars. You can book on at just2easy.com/training. So that is our website. There is a button. You may not know, but just2easy.com, there is a button off your Launchpad. This is our new website, brand new, launched last week. And if you go to events, there are all of our webinars. We've got a brand new one next week, making resources online next week. So you can book on any of these to join us. So thank you very much for attending, and we hope to see you again soon.